Hey, this is Mark A. Altman, and if you're a fan of the 4:30 movie, you'll love Best Movies Never Made, hosted by Jodorowsky's Dune producer Steve Scarlatta and Josh Miller, where they explore some of the greatest movies that were never made, from E.T. 2 to Tim Burton's Superman, Night Skies to Star Trek The Academy Years. New episodes available every other Monday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hello, this is not Gene Roddenberry, but if I was around, I would definitely be listening to Inglorious Trexperts, the new podcast from the people who brought you the 4:30 movie. Check it out, 430movie.com.
This is Mark A. Altman from Inglorious Trexperts. And if you like our show, Inglorious Trexperts, you'll love Disco Nights with host Chase Masterson and special guests every week. All new episodes premiere every Thursday night wherever you listen to podcasts.
Back in the 70s and 80s, before the advent of VHS, chances are if you saw a classic movie, it was on the 4:30 movie. With their famous theme weeks, it was a chance to see movies you never saw before and get reacquainted with some old classics. So now, join us for the 4:30 movie.
Hey, this is Mark A. Altman, and this is Hitchcock Week. Welcome. Hey,
Good
guys.
evening.
Good evening. How apt. How apropos for Alfred Hitchcock Week. And we're back here with our regular 4:30 movie curator / programmers / rankateurs /
And more slash.
and Kurt / Spock.
You can
So,
handle
Mother!
a lot of hurt comfort in this room.
Steve, writer-producer Steve Melching,
Hello there.
Mr. Concept Artist Darren Docterman,
Mr. Concept Artist. Well, at least I'm not Mr. Sci-Fi.
Mr. Sandman, sing me a dog.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
And writer-producer Ashley E. Miller.
Hey.
Wow. Well, it's great to be back here. I mean, talking about one of the great directors in the history of the medium, it's interesting because I think, not to bash millennials again, but when we were growing up, I mean, Hitchcock loomed large, not just because of his girth, but because of his filmography. I mean, it was just, I remember just being obsessed with Hitchcock, and I devoured that book, Dark Side of Genius by Donald Spoto, and just anyone who was interested in movies just knew the work of Alfred Hitchcock backwards and forwards, the master of suspense. And I think part of that was also because he had put himself in a lot of the trailers. He did his cameos.
He was one of the first real celebrity directors.
Right.
He was someone who would go on talk shows.
He
had
marketed
his own,
himself.
Yeah, he had his own television show, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, where he would introduce.
Yeah.
He was a director that the average person, he knew what he looked like and what he
his
sounded.
famous cameos in most of his movies.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, and when you think about it, how brilliant he was, look at a movie like Lifeboat, where it all takes place in a lifeboat. How is Alfred Hitchcock going to do a cameo? And he's in a newspaper ad that is, so it's just, and he just had so much fun winking at the audience, and his movies were light, fluffy confections, and even when they were dark, it was a full meal, and it just and he never missed a meal, and
Clearly
he's so and I'm always amazed when people aren't as familiar with the work of Alfred Hitchcock. I mean, this industry, and particularly suspense, mystery, has been built on the back of his genius. I mean, I don't know if a lot of people know this, the whole James Bond franchise was in a way that influenced by North by Northwest, and in fact, there was a time when they were trying to get Alfred Hitchcock to direct Dr. No, or it would have been the first James Bond, first James Bond movie, and Alfred Hitchcock, ultimately ended up passing on it, and they was happy because they thought, he'd only do one movie and it would never become a series anyway. But just such a great guy, and if you don't know,
he was brought over from England by David O. Selznick, I believe.
That's right.
Correct.
That's right, to do Rebecca, because he had been very successful in England. He started in the Silence, and a lot of his great silent work. I believe we saw. What was it? Blackmail at Comic-Con at Telluride Film Festival.
The silent version.
Yeah. And
Saboteur also.
We saw
right?
Saboteur, yeah.
Saboteur.
Yeah.
With
Norman Lloyd.
Norman Lloyd, who was there, who's still alive.
Thank
what is he,
God.
102, 103?
Yeah. And he spoke about Saboteur, and that was one of the great. I mean, we've seen so many great movies at Telluride and had so many great experiences. I mean, I was there. This was before you started going, many, many years ago, and I think it was wasn't Ernie Lehman. I think it was Charles Brackett or not, Burnett. Who they did an afternoon with Hitchcock's writers, and they had a couple of the living writers who spoke about his films, and it was really fantastic.
As opposed to the dead writers.
Alfred Hitchcock is here.
And it's funny. I don't know if you remember this, but during the Writers Guild strike back in the late 80s, this is when the second season of Star Trek, The Next Generation, was delayed, much to our chagrin at the time. What NBC did was to program during the strike, they showed old episodes of, they used the old Hitchcock introductions to Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which they colorized and used as wraparounds for new episodes. It was either shot in Australia, or somehow they got around or they were doing the old scripts. I don't remember, but they did a remake of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, but they colorized the original Hitchcock introductions, and that was on during the strike because the networks were so desperate for programming during the Writers Guild strike. And what was that, 88?
I remember that vaguely.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of younger people, during my film school days in the 80s, Darren probably remembers this as well. One of the most famous popular classes in the critical studies program at USC was an Alfred Hitchcock class that I think was done every other semester,
or
every third semester,
something like that.
And it was I always wanted to take it, but it never fit into my schedule. But it was an entire class just on Hitchcock, an entire semester, and they watched pretty much his entire filmography, and
wow.
It just looked amazing. I sat in on it a couple of times to see the films.
You audited it?
Yeah. I just snuck in the back and sat in the back. But it was tremendous. I think they still do that show there. I mean, that class at USC. I'm not sure, though.
Now, was that Drew Casper?
Yes.
Or is that
Dr.
Richard
Casper.
Jewell? Okay, that was
Drew Casper, the friendly professor.
Yes.
The Jack LaLanne of film critics.
Yes.
It's amazing. There's probably no director that's had more influence on other directors than anyone, other than Hitchcock. I mean, sure, you look at somebody like Brian De Palma, who was literally aping Hitchcock through his early career with movies like Dress to Kill and Body Double,
right.
Which is totally...
he's one of the few directors that's become an adjective. You have a Hitchcockian film,
right.
Like you have a Kubrickian or Spielbergian.
And he was so facile. I mean, look, I'm not a huge fan. We'll get to the movies in a second, like a comedy like... The Trouble with Harry, but he was so willing to push the envelope and do things that other people at the time didn't do, and take risks and go outside his comfort zone, and it's just can't say enough great things. And there's some beautiful Blu-ray box sets, because of course the library is over a couple of different studios. So Universal has, beautiful set devoted to some of his movies. But then you also have, I think there's the, Notorious just recently came out on Criterion. So anyway, we'll get into that as we get into the films. But we're here to curate a week of fantasy theme week of movies. This week it's Hitchcock week. So as always, we'll start with you, Steve Melching. Monday.
All right.
What Alfred Hitchcock movie are we going to be watching on Monday?
Well, originally I was going to pick a movie that maybe my favorite Hitchcock, and then I remembered that we already talked about it on the show. That's North by Northwest. I love that show.
And for those of you who may not recall, this was my pick for Movies We're Thankful For week.
Yeah, so if you want to hear us talk about that movie, rewind to Movies We're Thankful For week.
And I will say that would have been my pick as well.
or wait till maybe I pick it.
Okay. We'll wait about 8 minutes. No. So I'm instead going to pick another movie that I've always really loved that can be summed up in one hyphenated word. Crisscross.
Oh, yes.
Of course,
Excellent choice.
Talking about Strangers on a Train from 1951. It was a film that was based on a Patricia Highsmith novel, and apparently Hitchcock optioned the rights to that novel via a pseudonym in order to get it more cheaply. Right? And Highsmith was apparently upset that when she found out that Hitchcock got her book, and she only got like $5,000 or something. It was initially adapted by Raymond Chandler wrote the first 2 drafts of the screenplay,
which is the stories about Chandler as a screenwriter in Hollywood are legendary.
Yes.
I mean, he also did early drafts on Double Indemnity, and he was a drunk and a procrastinator, much like.
So he was a screenwriter.
And apparently Hitchcock was unhappy with the drafts that he turned in and essentially threw them out and wanted to hire Ben Hecht, but Hecht was unavailable, so he hired his protege or assistant. I'm not sure how to pronounce the name. Chenzi Ormond, a woman, and she totally did a page 1 rewrite on this script and added some of the major elements like the carousel at the end and the cigarette lighter. And those things seem so baked into the movie. You wonder what it was like without those.
I'm just really surprised that this wasn't your pick for Sports Week, the great tennis movie that it is.
Well, that reminds me, one of my favorite shots in all of Hitchcock, there's a scene that takes place at a tennis tournament, and what's his name? The Farley Granger character, who's the guy who's the tennis player, is in this tennis match, and he looks up and during the tennis match, the audience is watching the ball ping pong back and forth, so their heads are turning, left, right, left, right, except for Robert Walker, who is the stalker, who's staring straight into camera as the camera slowly moves.
I mean, so many iconic images, and it's like you could cut a montage, and it's just like it's the same way that scene in Foreign Correspondent with the umbrellas, and that Spielberg aped in Minority Report. It's just so great and so memorable. And you talk about that scene. If you haven't seen Strangers on a Train, you absolutely should.
If you haven't seen it, the gist of the story is these 2 strangers, Farley Granger
on a
and
train,
Robert Walker, meet on a train, and it's clear that something's off about Robert Walker's character, Bruno. He's weird, and he starts talking about the perfect murder.
You know why he's weird? He's Charlie X's dad.
Yes.
That's right.
Charlie is his darling.
And he hits on this idea that, they each have someone in their lives that they would like to get rid of. He has an overbearing, terrible father that he wants out of the picture, and Farley Granger is in the middle of trying to get out of his marriage, a messy divorce, and he's dating a senator's daughter, and he really wants to be with her, but his wife is making it difficult. So he says, well, you could kill my father, and I could kill your wife, and that way there'd be nothing, we could create the perfect alibis for ourselves, and then we wouldn't have a motive to kill the person, that we're killing.
It really is a great plan.
Yeah, it's fun.
I mean, if I was ever going to kill my wife, that's probably what I would do, but I would never do that because I love my wife.
And, to kick off the movie, Robert Walker thinks that they have a deal. So he actually does stalk down Farley Granger's wife and murder her, and then shows up to confront Farley Granger and say, "Okay, now it's your turn." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" So the movie kind of takes off from there, and it's just a great suspense film. It's got a great score by Dmitri Tiomkin, gorgeous Oscar-winning black and white cinematography. It's just a terrific film, it's got great dialogue in it. When at the end there's a climactic scene with a carousel that's spinning out of control while the 2 main characters are fighting it out, and they go, "I want to turn this thing off," and the cops turn to each other, "We got to turn that off." And the carousel operator says, "I can do it," and he says, "Are you crazy?" And he starts crawling on. I guess he can make it okay. It's so funny.
It reminds me. I really miss train movies. It's like I miss that era. Where people would go across the country on trains, and it was all these great North by Northwest.
Still do, just not as interestingly.
It's not, the Amtrak isn't quite as interesting. Yeah, it's the Western Flyer. Or
Did
whatever.
you see Murder on the Orient Express?
Which
last
I
year?
liked. Yeah, and my daughter and I
did too,
loved it. I thought it was great, and I love that it captured that more elegant.
That train thing.
Well, the Orient Express.
Yes.
Everybody's in one big long room, and
Well, and they found Pedro Almodovar on the
That's right.
and Robert Shaw in one of the cabins
That's right.
dead. And oh wait,
No, that's
movie.
a different one.
But no, I thought Kenneth Branagh did a really nice job with that remake. It's really entertaining, and even though it opens it up with like the requisite action scene, it's still really well done.
But none of them were strangers on a train.
No.
Yeah.
As it turns out.
There's a certain tragic element to this movie now too, and that's the story of Robert Walker. Robert Walker went to acting school in New York, where he met Jennifer Jones, who became his wife, and they kind of slowly came up, first in radio and then in movies. David O. Selznick. Speaking of David O. Selznick, discovered Jennifer Jones and became obsessed with her and broke up their marriage. It was a really terrible story. And Walker kind of spun into alcoholism and depression. And this film was his big comeback. He was a rising star in the early 40s and then kind of hit the skids in the mid to late 40s. But Hitchcock cast him in this role, and it was a big breakout starring role for him. He's terrific in it. And unfortunately, he died about 4 to 6 weeks after this movie came out. Mm-hmm. So he was never able to sort of capitalize on the success. And of course, his son.
But at least he got a movie made.
Robert Walker
Jr. Ended up being in Star Trek and was the spitting image of his dad. They look exactly the same.
I'm glad we're keeping our streak intact. That there has been no 4:30 movie episode where we have not mentioned Star Trek at least once. But
Strange on a Train.
Great.
If you haven't seen it, check it out.
Great movie. Darren Docterman.
Oh yes, it's
Tuesday. It is
Tuesday. All right. Well, if it's Tuesday, that must mean it's black and white day. I'm going with 1960 and Psycho.
Oh, excellent choice.
It's to some it's the obvious choice, so naturally I have to make it.
Never heard of it.
Well, it's about this psycho.
See, when a boy loves his mother very much.
We don't call him Psycho anymore. We call him
neurologically
slasherly challenged.
It's whenever someone mentions a Hitchcock movie, 9 times out of 10 someone will think of this film from 1960, starring Anthony Perkins, but ostensibly starring Janet Leigh, who was billed as the star of the movie. And she is for the first 20 minutes. And then she's not. Because it starts out as this, very, very sultry mystery about this girl who steals money from her small company, real estate company that she works for, and she makes a getaway and winds up in a horrible rainstorm and has to stop for the night at this little motel on the side of the road with a strange old house up on the hill behind it. And so she checks into this, little seedy motel, and the manager there is this young man who seems a little bit twitchy, but not out of the ordinary. There's a lot of stuffed animals around everywhere.
It ain't Mickey Mouse.
Not like fluffies, like loveys, like I give to my toddlers, but
like animals.
Yeah. Taxidermy. Yeah.
But no, I'm
More
calling
accurately.
them stuffed animals because they are. And
literally stuffed animals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is why I almost named this for my Thanksgiving movie. A lot of stuffing in it. But obviously things happen, bad things. And we
Stranger Things.
No, and we learn that this is a not well gentleman, and the mystery. She is. This is a spoiler, so for all you who don't know the movie and don't, plan on being spoiled, turn down your radio now. I'll wait. Can you hear me?
Your radio?
Okay, good.
Turn down your radio.
Your radio.
I'm just trying to bring it back into this, early days.
Who knows what evil lurks?
The shadow does. occasionally. But the Shadow didn't know what happened to
Shadow had no idea.
poor Janet Leigh, who just wanted to take a shower, for crying out loud. And bad things happen. And she is murdered and put in the trunk of her car, and the car is dumped in the river. And we follow along with this investigator named Arbogast, played by Martin Balsam, who incidentally was Stanley Kubrick's first choice for the voice of Hal. I can't imagine how that would have gone, because he has a very East Coast accent, very gravelly.
Can you give us some idea?
No, I cannot. I cannot at all.
Even
I, with my great speed,
the man of 1,000
it.
voices can't do 1,001 2001 voices.
That's funny. And he meets a grisly fate in a very interesting sequence that you'll all love. And there's actual visual effects done in that shot. Which
if you love murder,
you're gonna love Psycho. But it's a tour de force in mystery and creepiness, and it's a thriller, and it's a slasher movie, but with no slashing actually. It's all sort of inferred.
Well, and very, very lean and mean, because it was made on a pretty low budget, as
Absolutely.
I recall, for television initially.
That's
right?
correct.
Yes,
because
correct.
he had his, he was doing Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and he did it. This is how groundbreaking he was. He's so ahead of his time. He's done some of the biggest movies of all time, huge success. And he said,
and he'd just done North by Northwest.
Right, he just did in VistaVision for MGM. This big with Cary Grant, and even where he said, James Mason.
So if that was his 1941, the Psycho was his Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I'm pretty sure North by Northwest is a little better than 1941.
No, I'm talking about big, giant, expensive movie.
Right.
That's what I'm
Followed
talking
by-
about.
I don't know.
Followed
It's
by
more
a
like the
very cheap
post
movie
after.
that is brilliant.
Okay. So
Give me a break.
But so he did it through the TV division, and the studio was really reluctant, but you can't say no to Hitchcock because he was talking about violence. I mean, he was talking about nudity. He was talking about and you have to put yourself in the mind of the early '60s. It's there was never been a movie like this, and there was still censorship. I mean, there was still the vestiges of the Hays Code, and I mean this was pushing boundaries. And if it had been anybody but Hitchcock, it's unlikely that could have gone away with what he got away with, the implied nudity, the death of her in the shower. I mean, even then they couldn't show a toilet in the bath. They showed a toilet in the bathroom. It was very controversial, that because you hadn't really seen toilets in a bathroom
Couldn't
before.
have a king bed, or
right? And it opens with that sort of saucy scene between John
the
Gavin,
very sweady scene between John Gavin
and Janet Leigh, which then
Janet Leigh.
Sort of aped by Lawrence Kasdan in Body Heat.
Correct.
And then it's the movie that launched 1,000 slasher movies.
Right.
Which none of which come close to the quality of.
And of course, the famous shower scene where Janet Leigh is murdered was very carefully directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Now, Saul Bass did storyboards for it, and later would claim that he directed it, which is, I'm sorry, it's BS, because Hitchcock knew what he wanted, and Bass was a wrist, basically. And there's nothing shameful in that. I've done it myself. But the amazing capability of showing this horrific thing without showing any blood, really, except maybe you can argue the last shot of it.
Mother blood.
Yeah. Has some in it. Of course, it's not really blood; it's chocolate syrup. But it is done so deftly with the minimum of cuts, and it's so well done. It's obviously
the
film
editing
schools
is tremendous.
Yeah, and of course
score.
it's helped by the score by Bernard Herrmann, which is iconic,
masterful.
What stands out to me about that sequence, and frankly this movie in general, is that it really It's an exercise that demonstrates the difference between surprise and suspense in a story. There are so many directors who try to direct movies in this genre who think that a shock or a jump or what have you is something that's really going to keep the audience engaged, and it doesn't.
Like the ketchup commercials, anticipation is
what makes you wait. Yes. And, in this movie, our surprise is that Janet Leigh is dead.
Right.
Our surprise is that, Norman loves his mother a little too much.
Right.
But the suspense comes from not that, the knife comes out of nowhere. It's because we know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
We know every time there's a kill, it's going to happen. The audience superior knowledge
knows
of the scene.
what's going to happen.
Exactly.
But they don't know when, they don't know how, and they don't know who next.
So they're just hanging there and they're just waiting. And that's why they call Hitchcock the master of suspense. And it's amazing to me how many directors, filmmakers don't understand why that works, the primal logic of that, and how Hitchcock would just do that effortlessly in his films.
Oh, I'm no longer amazed at how many people don't understand things.
He was famously described as, directing a scene two different ways about, an assassination at a lectern. One, the lecturer approaches a lectern and it explodes because there was a bomb hidden in the lectern, and it's a shocking surprise. And the alternative version is you see the bomb ticking down to detonation, and you don't know. You're like, get out of there. What's going to.
But you must never let it go off.
Right.
That was what he said. It's like you can't then have the bomb go off. It's funny to the point that Ashley's making. I mean, to me, one of the most effective scenes in the movie, and it's extremely subtle, and it's not one of the classic scenes you see at the AFI tribute, is the scene where he's sinking the car with Janet Leigh's body in it, and it's going into the swamp, and he's watching, and then it stops, and all of a sudden, as the audience, we're on his side for him.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you got to take care of that. You'll get caught.
It's the power of POV. It's that, and Hitchcock was again the master of that. It's whose POV are you building a scene around, and just the selection of that can change how we perceive the movie. And Hitchcock, he never missed the trick. He always chose perfectly.
And I also have to call out one little Easter egg. Near the end, we see the police guards, and one of them is Ted Knight.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
From the Mary
Yes. Norman.
Yes.
Meanwhile, it's funny. The thing I remember so vividly about, when I was a kid, was I used to, I was hugely obsessed with Hitchcock after seeing North by Northwest, and my parents wouldn't let me see Psycho. And so I would always see the same two scenes on like the AFI tribute to Alfred Hitchcock. Because he famously, never won an Oscar until he won his honorary Oscar. But there were always these tributes and these specials, and that they Master of Suspense. And they always showed the same two scenes, the shower scene and the scene at the end where he turns around the chair and we reveal Mrs. Bates and the light bulb and all that. And so those are the only scenes I knew, but I so had them ingrained. And I finally saw it. I think it was like I was going to Brown during the summer in high school, the Brown University, and they were screening some movies, and I finally got to see Psycho on the big screen, and it was just a revelation. I'm like, I could not believe how good this movie was, and even though it's a movie that so many people I think know in their heads, like even if they haven't seen it,
they think they know it.
They think they know it, but there's so much going on. Even the stuff at the beginning with with Pat Hitchcock, and where it's total red herring that whole first 20 minutes.
It's so great.
It's so great, and just everything about it, except for the Johnny Explainer at the end. The exposition, the Simon Oakland, it's like I know, looking at our watch, and it's like, but even the tricks where when it was first released, you cannot enter the theater. Because then people used to go in and out of theaters and with the double bills, and nobody worried about getting there, and there wasn't reserved seating.
Right.
He's like absolutely no one will be admitted into the theater for the last shocking 15 minutes. I mean, he was truly a Barnum and Bailey showman, Hitchcock, and you miss that in your film directors now. That quality that Hitchcock had. I mean, he's just remarkable. And a remarkable movie. And you mentioned Bernard Herrmann, and that score is one of the great movie scores of all time, obviously. And it's not just the famous shower sting that everyone knows. Right. It's the driving music and
one of the
suspense.
the low basses play a 3-note motif, boom, 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 that you hear throughout, and it's in Star Wars. It's in Star Wars when Han and Chewie come out of the holding compartments on the Falcon, and that's a little Easter egg from John Williams to Bernard Herrmann.
One of my fondest memories when I first came out to California was I was invited to a book signing with Janet Leigh at the Bates Motel on the lot.
On the lot.
So it was like catering by the motel, and then she was signing, and right in the shadow of that magnificent, iconic house, and it was just so great. I felt like, wow, I'm really in Hollywood. This is awesome.
Back in the day when I used to work at Universal on a couple shows, I used to take a golf cart and drive up to the Psycho House and have lunch in the Psycho House just to hang out.
That's so cool.
And it was
Until
such
Mother
a great
threw you
time.
out.
Where did you keep the bodies?
You'll find out.
Well, that's a great pick for Tuesday. So now Wednesday, hopefully we're gonna have a real Cloak and Dagger for Wednesday.
It's
Psycho
The Empire
2.
Strikes Back.
It's always interesting to see what Ashley E. Miller has to say. So Ashley, take it away for Wednesday.
Well, generally I like to do something different, and with Hitchcock, it's really hard to do something different and kind of out of left field. I will say, though, that my pick, I think, is probably one that doesn't necessarily rise to the top of everyone's Hitchcock list, not because it's not as great as his other films, but just because it's a film that I think sits outside a little bit of how we normally consider Hitchcock as a filmmaker, as a storyteller. I have always admired Hitchcock. I mean, just intellectually admired him as a watcher of film, as a filmmaker, as a writer. I've always appreciated what he is able to do and the tricks that he pulls and how deftly he pulls them. The first Hitchcock film I ever loved was also the first Hitchcock film I ever saw in a theater. I saw it at the ArcLight AFI, 40 Feet High, To Catch a Thief. It's a beautifully made movie. It is so much fun. It's incredibly elegant. It stars Cary Grant, Grace Kelly. It is literally impossible for that movie to be more beautiful than it is. And I would argue that as much as you can see the DNA of North by Northwest in the Bond films, I think there's quite a bit of To Catch a Thief in there too. I mean, you could make the argument that that Bond as a literary device in the way that he worked in the minds of his audience kind of informed To Catch a Thief. Simply because it's, you're in these exotic locations with these beautiful people doing these amazing things with a very charming hero. The plot of this movie is it's dirt simple and brilliant. Cary Grant plays an infamous cat burglar. John Roby, the cat, who has retired from being a cat burglar. He's retired to the French Riviera, but a string of burglaries seems to point to the cat's return. Now, Roby knows that he's innocent, right? Even though his buddies, he used to be a member of the French Resistance, even though his buddies from the Resistance all believe that it's possible that he may in fact be the cat. So Roby sets out to prove his innocence by catching the cat in the act. And he makes a list of who are all of the wealthy people who are visiting the Riviera now. And he's going to stake them out, and he's going to find the cat, and he's going to uncover this person who's basically ruining his life by casting this light back on him. And he winds up in a bit of a love triangle, one that he doesn't quite expect, one that's a little bit awkward. First, Grace Kelly, who is the daughter of one of the people on the list. So he is someone on some level he's trying to protect, but at the same time, he's completely infatuated with her.
Well, who wouldn't be?
Who would not be? My God. I mean, 40 feet high. It's almost overwhelming looking at Grace Kelly. You can't even believe it. You understand how she became, Princess Grace. Like she's amazing. And then there is the daughter of one of his friends, who is basically in love with him, a little bit obsessed with him, but not in a creepy way. But how their relationship, those three relationships evolve, how Roby deals with them is really what drives the film forward to a reveal in the third act when he finally catches this imposter, this other cat that's just perfect.
Yeah, it's such a great movie, and there's a lot of location filming on the French Riviera, and you got to remember at the time air travel was something only for the super rich, so it was a chance to experience the world in a way that people didn't really get to. And a lot of movies until that time were really confined to studio sets and maybe an establishing shot. I mean, it's in rich color and it just envelops you.
And you get to see Hitchcock sitting in the back of a bus.
Yeah, yes. And I mean, two of the most beautiful people to ever walk the earth, Cary Grant and Grace Kelly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so entertaining and so much fun. And you're absolutely right. Would I put it? Is it my top Hitchcock movie? Is it my top 5? Probably not. But it's like just wildly entertaining. Super confection. It's glamorous and exciting and still is super suspenseful. And it leans into everything we see France. The striped shirts and the red berets, and it's great. What do you think, Steve? Are you big fan of To Catch a Thief?
No, I like it. It's a little dim in my memory because, to be honest, it's been about 15 or 20 years.
Dim. Grace Kelly was luminous.
Right.
Luminous.
Sumptuous.
It was sumptuous. Yeah.
When she was
it's what my erstwhile writing partner. It's one of his favorite films, and I got a chance to see it on a big screen as well at a revival, maybe at the Egyptian or something, and it's super entertaining. It's a really entertaining, fun film, and I have fond memories of it, but they're a bit dim.
I'm always surprised when he throws one straight down the middle. That's why he's such a good pitcher.
We're all dumbfounded.
He's always hitting the corners with his throws, and so you're always chasing him, and this one right down the middle.
This is the changeup.
But I think it's a great choice, and all the French character actors who were in it, and like you said, the Hitchcock cameo, and it's not one of my favorite Hitchcock scores, but
it's serviceable.
It's serviceable. It gets the job done.
And the dialogue, by the way, is really great. It's really just sharp and spot on. It plays to everything that is great about Cary Grant. I mean, when I think about Cary Grant, of course, I think about His Girl Friday. But the reason why I think about that is just that man's ability to just snap off the dialogue, but without making it feel like it's artifice. Like he really is being a character. Now, sometimes that character is essentially Cary Grant. But you believe this guy. He's everything that you want him to be. He would have been an amazing Bond.
I'm not like somebody who's into the royal family and all that. But you watch Grace Kelly and you sort of understand all these people are obsessed with Princess Diana and the people's princess. It's like Grace Kelly, is one of the most beautiful women ever to walk the earth, as I said, and yet she seems just very down to earth, and she's super funny and just smart and is able to be self-deprecating, and you kind of see
and apparently wild.
Yeah. Well, that was yeah, and but you can see why she ended up becoming the Princess of Monaco, and then giving up her whole career. And, in a way, it's sort of sad because you think, oh, my God, had she not given up her career to become Princess of Monaco, she'd still be alive, but she wouldn't have been in that car accident.
Yeah, but she would have aged in front of our eyes in
movies.
But
I think it would have been nicer if she had a full life. Then you were able to maintain the illusion of eternal beauty.
Others would argue that she lived a full life in the short time that she had.
And you think because there are other movies that Hitchcock wanted her for, but she said, look, I'm retired. I'm no longer, acting, because I guess part of that was Prince Rainier who didn't want her. But, look, the time that we had her, and I mean, there are a couple movies we haven't mentioned that she's in that I'm sure we'll get to. But she was a great actress. There are a lot of these, these actresses that we remember, these beautiful, and actors too. But what they were like Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner was one of the gorgeous, but not a great actress. Grace Kelly, had it all.
And she had something behind the eyes.
Right.
Yes.
And she went toe-to-toe with Cary Grant. Right.
Yeah. And just great supporting performances and just a wonderful movie. So...
Well, and you mentioned the photography. I just wanted to point out the cinematographer was Robert Burks, who was the same cinematographer from Strangers on a Train, and actually I think did something like 14 or 15 of Hitchcock's films. A very frequent collaborator.
It's Robert Burks week on the fourth movie, and it's something we should do because the ASC is celebrating the American Society of Cinematography is celebrating its 100th anniversary. We should probably do a week at some point on. the best looking movies of best shot, great cinematography week or something. Visions of Light.
Overrated week on the 4:30 movie.
Oh my God.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't speaking as a member of the art department that never gets credit for stuff like that.
Wow. The cat indeed.
Oh, dear.
So Thursday, it kind of falls to me. And look, you're going to be pleased to know I have one pick. One pick only.
One
pick
pick
only.
only, please.
One ping. I look for and you said it before. I mean, it might have been North by Northwest had I not already picked it a couple weeks ago. But this was an easy one for me.
I know what it is.
Me too.
Do you?
Go ahead.
I don't.
Yeah, go.
I'm in suspense.
I'll be surprised.
It's Cary Grant, Ingrid Bergman, and Claude Rains in Notorious.
Oh,
Wow.
I
wrong.
love this movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
that was my runner-up, I think.
And it is incredible. Sometimes you read these people. I know there was a what they talk about. Oh, black and white movies are so old-fashioned, and the acting and all. These people should have their heads examined. This is the most modern, contemporary, edgy, twisted, dark, messed up movie I can think of. I mean, because when you really think about it, it takes place during World War II, and basically Ingrid Bergman's father had been working with the Nazis down in South America on their heavy water experiments, and she hangs out with a lot of Germans and German expatriates, and sort of not the greatest people in the world. And so Cary Grant tries to recruit her to go undercover, in Claude Rains' organization down in South America. And she's just this ne'er-do-well, bon vivant. She's sort of like a Kardashian, and and basically
The snake-necked
only
aliens from Star Trek?
No, this is the one non-Star Trek reference.
Oh, okay.
And so he recruits her and basically falls in love with her, but that doesn't keep him from basically forcing her to have, I mean, it's implied, have sex with Claude Rains and manipulate him and ultimately marry him and Cary Grant's put in this really, this horrible position where he has to continue to pretend that he doesn't care about her to get her to do what she needs to do. But at the same, it's so dark and twisted, and he's amazing, and she is incredible, and it's just brilliantly shot. There's that great shot where she wakes up with the worst hangover of all time, and she opens her eyes, and you see in that Dutch camera angle the silhouette of Cary Grant in the door frame, right when he's about to recruit her and for to work for the government. And they have all these recordings. She's pretending that she's sympathetic to the Germans and her dad, but really she believes in America. And it's just kind of so suspenseful. One of the great endings of any Hitchcock movie. Claude Rains is fantastic. And of course, in terms of those virtuoso Hitchcock set pieces, there's a scene where she has to go into the wine cellar, get to find, they're looking for this, MacGuffin, the uranium ore, and he steals the key from Claude Rains during a party, and the camera is just tracking around and, comes off of to the key. It finds the key, and then they have to pretend when they get caught, and what are they going to do? And Cary Grant grabs her and kisses her. I mean, it's just so many great scenes in the movie. It's so brilliantly written and
Ben Hecht.
shot. Ben Hecht.
Ben Hecht wrote it.
Who later would write a draft of Casino Royale for producer Charlie Feldman when it was still going to be a series version, which is one of the last things he did before he died. He died 2 days before he turned in a rewrite.
Oh, wow.
It's one way to get out of a deadline. And
if you were a real writer, he would have finished it first.
But just I can't say enough good things about Notorious. Like I said, it's not only one of my favorite Hitchcock movies; it's one of my favorite movies of all time, and an easy pick for Hitchcock Week.
It kind of started as a David Selznick production. Selznick was trying to develop it and own the underlying story rights. I think it was based on a serial story that was published in a magazine, and he gave it to Hitchcock. He was having trouble cracking it and gave it to Hitchcock. Hitchcock started working on it, and there was a little bit of a dance, like will he or won't he? And I think he ended up selling his rights to Hitchcock or to RKO.
Well, and it's kind of like only Cary Grant could get away with playing such a bastard and still be likable, because I mean the things he's making her do, and still you're sympathetic to Cary Grant. And there's such a self-loathing that all the characters have, whether it's Ingrid Bergman or Ingrid Bergman's Alicia, or Cary Grant's Devlin. They both hate themselves for what they're doing, but it's the things we do for our country, and to stop the Germans, and you can't say enough good things about Claude Rains in this movie, and then all the supporting actors, his mother, the very stern German mother, who's just terrifying, more terrifying than probably any horror boogeyman, and that group that is so threatening. There's such a menace and that hangs over this movie, in that third act. It's really great. And then when they're onto her and start to poison her, it's such a great movie. I want to go and watch it right now just talking about it.
So that's Thursday.
So that's Thursday.
To Friday.
It brings us to Friday. So many choices, isn't it?
Gosh.
Day 5.
Day 5.
What to do? What to do? I want to throw one out because it's the backside of the week. I'm going to go with Rear Window.
Because it's the backside of the week, you want to go with Rear Window?
That was a
kind of a
close
movie.
second for me. Also, Rear Window.
That's
terrific.
That's number 2, second pick for me, because I love it. It's so
It's so
entertaining. Simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so simple.
But it's brilliant, and it raises questions. Well, what would you actually do if you were in this situation? And it's so well done. Jimmy Stewart is amazing, and of course Grace Kelly again,
and Raymond Burr.
Well, Raymond Burr is really weird.
Yeah,
really weird in it.
Well, and from a production design standpoint,
Oh
it
my
has
God.
that
It's
magnificent set.
Yeah.
Which one of the great movie sets of all time.
Absolutely.
All done on a
freaking
soundstage.
All done on a soundstage, and all self-contained. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't know, you have to be a certain age, but Rear Window is one of 5 Hitchcock movies that were out of circulation for many years, that the estate owned, that I guess Universal did. So they weren't in circulation in the late '80s. They made a big deal. They were all re-released. The first of them to be re-released in theaters was Rear Window, and I remember going to see that and just being, I had never seen it, and it hadn't been available, and even home video or even on the repertory circuit. And it came, and I was just blown away. I was like, "Oh my God, this movie!" And in fact, my mom took me to see it in Manhattan. It was like, unlike The Hunger, this was a totally appropriate film to watch with my mom. And
This only has murder in it.
it only has Raymond Burr, but it was and it is a little saucy because the stuff between Jimmy
it
Stewart
absolutely
and Grace
is.
Kelly is like really racy.
Yeah. If he weren't in a cast, she would be in trouble.
And
And talk about suspense. I mean, the scene where he's in his,
Oh, my God.
he's got his broken leg up in his apartment while she's sneaking into
around.
he's
the
another jerk
suspected murderers.
making her sneak around.
Well,
And,
what's he supposed to do?
well, she almost
While he's watching through his telephoto lens.
Oh,
I
my
mean,
God.
it's incredible. The suspense is wonderful.
And it's a great simple premise. I mean, that's one thing that I think is common to almost all of Hitchcock's films. They've got a really great simple premise that comes back to that question that you asked, which is, what would you do? He was great at putting the audience in that position and asking them that question. And it's amazing to me. I think Rear Window has probably been remade, quote unquote, remade or homaged, like more than any other.
well, it was
Hitchcock
literally remade as Rear Window with Christopher Reeve for
Right.
television, I
Right.
believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course there were a million ripoffs
Yep.
of it. It's just again brilliantly shot, great trailer.
And talking about characters being smart. I mean, when the killer is coming to get Jimmy Stewart,
Right.
I mean, what are you going to do? You're trapped in an apartment. You got a broken leg.
Right.
He turns the lights out and uses the camera flash
Yes.
to blind this guy.
Yeah.
It's it's so clever.
And that influenced another great suspense thriller, which is not a Hitchcock film. Terrence Young's Wait Until Dark with Audrey Hepburn. Remember? And I feel that scene like really influenced. And that's such a great scene where Jimmy Stewart is yet totally debilitated, but has to fight off this menacing, hulking Raymond Burr. And just
the incredible Burr.
And then you have Thelma Ritter in there, and just like so many, again, a rich tapestry of supporting performances, which Hitchcock always was great at casting these, great supporting characters. It's such a great movie. So I think that is definitely a front runner for Fry, strong contender. Let's just throw out some other movies that are potentials. Look, I know it's recently been acclaimed as the greatest movie of all time. I don't agree with that. Vertigo. I love Vertigo.
Yeah. I think I don't understand that perception of it.
Yeah, I don't either.
It's very good, but
you know what?
It's
the missionary position of Hitchcock movies.
Yeah.
Everybody can like it, and it's fun, and it gets you there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's much that's wonderful about Vertigo, including Kim Novak in a dual performance, but I don't think it's
a great film, no question.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite Hitchcock. It's probably not even my top 3 or 4.
I heard voices telling me not to pick this for Friday.
I want to throw out one that I don't think it's one of his greatest films, but I have some affection for it, and I have a little personal connection to it, and that's The Birds, which is a fun movie. My connection to that is the diner that's featured in the film was owned by a family member of mine up in Bodego Bay.
So there's a commercial.
Yeah. My grandmother's uncle, I believe, owned that. And in exchange for Hitchcock being able to shoot there, I don't think they shot in it, but they shot in the parking lot, and he had to appear in the film. So I don't know what he is, my great uncle or whatever. He's in the movie getting off a boat, but Hitchcock staged it so his back is always to camera.
Oh, that's so funny.
You see him in profile briefly. His name was Mitchell Zankich.
Nobody tells me who to put in the movie.
Yeah, but
I'll show you.
Except you.
The lead thanks him. Thanks, Mitch.
That's
that's great.
I love The Birds mainly because it freaks me out on every level. I hate birds the way Indy hates snakes.
Okay.
So watching that movie for the first time, it was my worst nightmare come to life. Although the thing that strikes me about it is always like those 2 little, are they finches that are in the cage that are just sweet, and all they do is sing, and at the end it's like you sort of have them and you can't leave them. There is something about the birds that is, on some level it's all just surreal weirdness, but there's something apocalyptic about it in a good, not overly indulgent way that I dig. But I think it's cool. Plus all the stories about Tippi Hedren and Hitchcock and how much they loved each other.
I don't love The Birds, but I do love that classic scene where Tippi Hedren is sitting there and the birds start to land on the playground structure, and then suddenly more and more and more.
3 birds, and then there's 8 birds.
And it's really
and
funny.
That's pretty much where I exit the room.
Yeah.
thinking about that scene made me think about. I want to throw a.
Wait. Let me just mention one. Let me mention one thing about The Birds again.
Okay.
That I have a connection with it as well.
Oh.
Because one of my early mentors, Harold Michelson, was the storyboard artist on this, and he came up with a lot of these scenes with Hitchcock.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. And so,
Harold Michelson of Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
That's correct.
I had no idea you worked with him.
Well, I never actually worked with him, but because he was very active in my union, in the Illustrators Guild, he would be at meetings all the time, and he taught me how to back project from a plan and elevation and all sorts of stuff. And he was, I got
He's
to
a real
know
mentor
him.
to you.
Yeah, I got to know him pretty well.
That's fantastic. I had no idea. You learn all kinds of new things on the show, even about your friends. So, look, I have a really crazy out there pick for Friday.
Okay.
And originally I was obviously going to throw out things like Hitchcock's favorite movie, Shadow of a Doubt, great movie, Joseph Cotten, Teresa Wright, love it, not my pick. Saboteur we talked about, Norman Lloyd, that great scene on the Statue of Liberty. But everyone knows that scene, but the whole movie's great. For modern audience, it might be a little tough, a lot of dodgy rear projection and stuff. But so what? It's a great movie. and with great set pieces. It really is the test run for North by Northwest. North by Northwest is better. Saboteur
was that one that he had remade from a silent? Was Saboteur?
No, that was Sabotage.
Sabotage.
You say Saboteur, I say Sabotage. But here's a crazy pick for Friday. You ready?
All right.
This is crazy, guys. So bear with me. Don't make fun of me. High Anxiety.
Dude.
This was Mel Brooks's parody of Hitchcock. And I literally, it was not in my notes. I just thought of it when you were talking about the birds. And like, what a great way to, because Hitchcock loved it.
Yeah.
You know,
and
it parodies all the Hitchcock tropes. The birds, and you know, has that great, you picking up the luggage. I got it. I don't got it.
Vertigo.
And it's one of those movies that's sort of, I mean, growing up, it was like, we all knew that movie. We loved that movie. It was super fun. And it seemed, you know, now when people know Young Frankenstein, they know Blazing Saddles, but I feel like High Anxiety is not as well known.
And Barry Levinson as the paperboy.
Yes, yeah. And Cloris Leachman is in it as well, and Harvey Korman, and it's just, and it parodies the whole wrong man motif of the Hitchcock movies, with Mel Brooks being accused of a crime he didn't commit in that hotel, which seems so futuristic at the time. I just think,
And the big company engulf and devour.
It seems
no,
like
that's silent movie. I'm sorry.
Look, Rear Window is a masterpiece. High Anxiety is not a masterpiece, but it feels like it might just be the cherry on top for an amazing week of Hitchcock films.
I could go that direction.
I love the idea of High Anxiety. I think part of the helping people find movies they've never seen is our mission. That's what this podcast.
That's why we're
Let
about
me
it.
help.
It's
We'll
about.
even replace the words "I love you" one day.
No, I love it, man. I think I'm trying to imagine when else we would put a movie like High Anxiety like on our list, and maybe there would be because I think we all love it.
Mel Brooks week.
But Mel Brooks
we
week.
did like
but,
the Spoofs week.
But
or
this is
something
kind
like
of
that.
great. It's kind of a great little button. I like that idea.
Yeah, I like it too. I mean, I just want to throw out like Rope. I was always a fan of Rope, and it's often kind of dismissed as a gimmick movie because it's famously done in a single shot where the cuts are disguised.
Yeah.
Before digital, back
before
when
digital.
you actually had these
Before
giant
Star
cameras.
Yeah,
Yeah, you actually,
I
you know,
finally
ran out of
saw
reel.
it on a big screen and for the first time years ago, and I went into it expecting it to be this lightweight, gimmicky movie, and I thought it was super suspenseful. I really liked it.
Didn't they actually
inspired,
shoot
clever.
that in 3 days? Just like when they just going through.
Yeah, but
all
they
the-
rehearsed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's based on a play.
Well, the Leopold and Loeb
Right,
case,
right.
and then Rope was sort of the fictionalized version of that.
Yeah.
It's a very audacious movie. It's not in my top tier Hitchcocks, but I get
it's
what you're
interesting.
saying. Yeah. And it's a
it
good
deserves
movie.
better. It deserves better, I think.
It was sort of law of diminishing returns when those 5 movies came out because you had Rear Window, which was amazing, then Vertigo, which was amazing. Then I think Rope was the 3rd movie they showed those films when they were being reissued, and then it was Trouble with Harry. Oh, and Man Who Knew Too Much, the remake. Those were like the 5 films that got reissued in the 80s. You know, that finally the estate after Hitchcock died. Man Who Knew Too Much.
Rebecca.
Rebecca, the 39 Steps, Lady Vanishes. I mean,
Dial M for Murder.
Dial for Murder, it's better in 3D, actually, the way it was meant. But it's Grace Kelly again, and Ray Milland, it's Sarah Uri. And who else is in it? That another reason I really like Dial for Murder, although it's not one of my favorite Hitchcocks, but it's oh God, what's his name? The guy from Dr. No, the second. God, he's just this slimy guy. He's the guy who's hired to do the murder, who Grace Kelly inadvertently kills when he's supposed to kill Grace Kelly. God, what's his name? I don't remember. Anyway.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yes.
So
I like the High Anxiety idea.
I liked it too.
Yeah, High Anxiety.
I mean,
Fine.
who would have thought Rear Window would be toppled by High Anxiety?
Well, if you haven't seen Rear Window, you should definitely see it.
Yes.
Watch it on Saturday.
You should see all of these now.
Yes.
Like, that's the beauty of the show. You just never know what crazy pick we're going to come up with. And Fridays, it turned out to be a pretty wild ride for us over the episodes. But I think that's a great Hitchcock week. So Monday,
Strangers on a Train.
Tuesday,
Psycho.
Sicko. Wednesday,
To Catch a Thief.
Thursday, it's Notorious. And on Friday, on Hitchcock Week, it's Mel Brooks' High Anxiety. High Anxiety. So on behalf of Steve Melching, Darren Doctorman, Ashley E. Miller, myself, Mark A. Altman, thanks for joining us for 430 Movie. We'll be back next Friday with an all-new theme week. And if you enjoyed 430 Movie, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. It really helps bring new viewers or a new audience to the show. And, of course, listen to our sister podcast, Inglorious Trexperts, which is the only podcast for Star Trek fans with a life, and Disco Nights, which is a podcast devoted to Star Trek Discovery, and as well as our new show, Best Movies Never Made, with Jodorowsky Dune producer Steve Scarlatta taking you on a tour of some of the great films that never saw the light of a projector bulb. So again, this has been the 430 Movie. We'll see you next week. Eyewitness News starts now.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This episode is brought to you by Toshi Station for all your power converter needs. Ask for Fixer.
This podcast is a production of the Electric Surge Network.